Today on Underdogz, who has the most #1 singles and albums of all time? That's right, we're talking about the Beatles, a band pretty much everybody in the world has heard of. But do you actually know the Beatles story? Let's check it out. John Lennon and Paul McCartney met in Liverpool in 1957 as teenagers. John was playing a gig with his band, the Quarrymen, at a local party that Paul McCartney was at. He loved the band, and later that night, he performed one of his own original songs for John, who loved it and invited him to become part of the Quarrymen. Rumor has it, in their first few years, they wrote over 300 songs. Now, McCartney and Lennon are obviously two of the greatest songwriters to ever live, so there's an absolute ton of raw talent there. But you also have to consider how hard they worked and how many songwriting reps they got in. Talent mixed with hard work, I believe, is how they honed their songwriting craft. The Beatles were motherfucking hard workers, man. It's estimated in their first 5 years as a band that they performed over 1,200 times. That's insane. That's more than most artists do for their whole careers. They played shows 7 days a week. In 1960, they went to Hamburg, Germany, and played 48 straight nights of 6 to 8 hour sets in the red light district for just £2.50 each. They even took amphetamines just to stay awake and function properly. The Beatles were on a mission to succeed. After hundreds of shows, the Beatles only had a small local following and no attention from any record labels or managers. Enter Brian Epstein, a local record store owner and businessman. He saw the band play a local gig at a now famous bar called The Cavern, and he wanted to sign them instantly. He started pitching the Beatles to tons of record labels, but had no success. The Beatles were rejected by at least 5 different record labels. Decca Records famously told Brian Epstein, "Guitar music is on the way out, and the Beatles have no future in show business." I bet they wish they could get a mulligan on that one. This is a good lesson that failure is an absolutely crucial part of success. If you are trying to achieve something and you get told no, you cannot give up. Brian Epstein was able to get the Beatles an audition with a producer named George Martin, who worked for EMI Records. They set up in Studio 3 at Abbey Road Studio and played through a few songs. George Martin thought it was rubbish and he left the room to go get tea. Rubbish. After the session, he laid it out for the Beatles in the control room and told him where he thought that they were going wrong. After he explained it to them, he asked the band, "Is there anything you don't like?" George Harrison looked at him and said, "I don't like your tie." And the room erupted in laughter. Over the next 20 minutes, the band started really coming through, their personality and charisma making everybody laugh. This really won over George Martin, and he offered them a recording contract with Parlophone, a small label under EMI. If anyone deserves the title of the fifth Beatle, it's George Martin. He produced all the Beatles records and served as an arranger, composer, and multi-instrumentalist. A good example is the Beatles' first #1 hit, Please Please Me. The song was written as a slow ballad, but George Martin opted to speed up the tempo to make it more of a rock and roll song. Another is the Beatles song Yesterday, which is the most covered song in history. Martin thought it would be a good idea to add a string quartet and help compose the section himself. He created tape loops, backward playback, and double tracking of vocals, all technical innovations that still influence artists and producers even today. In 1963, the Beatles released I Wanna Hold Your Hand, their first #1 hit in America. A few months later, on February 9th, which happens to be my birthday, 1964, they played The Ed Sullivan Show, their first ever performance in America. It's estimated that 45% of the entire American population watched the performance. From this point on, Beatle Mania had fully begun. They broke almost every record to exist in music. They're the highest selling band of all time. They have the most #1 singles of any band in history, the most #1 albums of any band in history. They got a 3-movie deal, and ABC even made a Saturday night cartoon about the band. They were absolutely everywhere. What a lot of people don't realize is the Beatles' career wasn't very long. It was only 7 years from their first release to their breakup in 1970. Paul McCartney famously announced in 1970 that he would be leaving the band, ending the Beatles as a group. They left behind a legacy that may never again be recreated in music. They've influenced countless artists including Nirvana, Queen, Radiohead, Lady Gaga, Billy Joel, you name it. Almost every artist has been influenced by the Beatles in some way or another. The secret to the Beatles' success lies in their hard work, being themselves, and not being afraid to experiment. They pushed boundaries of what was considered pop music and opened up the door for all sorts of new artists and genres. Their influence is not just in music. They changed culture forever. They gave voice to the youth movement and promoted freedom of expression and individuality. They opened up the underground, and 50 years later, they're still considered to be the greatest band of all time.